Good morning, everyone. Everyone who's joining us for this, the St Hilda's Gaudy, a slightly strange Gaudy, but I think a really successful and apposite theme, I hope, something that will appeal to everyone. I'm Triona Adams, the Alumni Events Manager, just kicking off proceedings, saying hello to everybody joining us from throughout England and the UK and Europe. And I'm happy to say some people in America, Hong Kong and Singapore. So thank you for joining us. I think we're all going to have a splendid day in and around the college gardens. There's no better person than Sarah Watkinson to welcome us and kick off this special Gaudy. Sarah, Emeritus Fellow, quite rightly, not content with a high-flying career in the biosciences, when she retired, moved into another high-flying career as a published poet with her first collection, Dung Beetles Navigate by Starlight. She was the inaugural artist in residence at Whiteton Woods, and she's spending her so-called retirement bringing people, science, nature, and poetry together. So, as I say, no one more perfect than to kick off this wonderful day. I'm very happy to hand over to Sarah and hope you all have a marvelous time.
Thank you, Triona. It's lovely to be back. I actually retired from college in 2009, so I'm a very old girl indeed. And it's just absolutely delightful to me to be able to go round the gardens recently with our new garden consultant, Walter Sawyer, and see the amazing transformation that he's made of it and all the things that I used to think it would be nice to do are now in the process of happening. And so I really look forward to following Walter around the garden and sharing with you all the marvelous things he's doing. Walter.
Good morning, Sarah. Well,
I'd just like to, can I just introduce Walter?
Yeah.
Walter is now the college garden consultant and has been for 2 years. And this is a fantastic catch for St Hilda's because before that, Walter Sawyer ran the university parks, the whole thing, the gardeners, the budget, the choice of plants and everything. He is a superb plantsman and also has a fantastic eye for how plants can work to make a university life about 100% better for everybody. So I think I'd just like to introduce Walter and let him talk to us now. So we're going to take you on a tour around the garden, and Walter is going to point out the various things that he's been doing, and I look forward very much to your seeing this. So, Walter.
Okay, well, thank you, Sarah. It's very nice to be involved with St Hilda's. I've been offering some advice, but also getting my hands dirty, and I realised that that's how I came into horticulture in the first place, and that it's been quite nice to be involved with the gardeners and actually physically doing some work as well as planning, and see the site improving too. So it's been a happy experience after a very busy job. I had responsibility for 240 places in Oxford, as well as the university parks. So it was really, a full-on kind of job and very administrative, particularly as it grew and grew. So I think we should look at the garden, Sarah, don't you?
Well, first, before you go to the Suffragette Border and start our tour of the garden, I'd just like to ask you your general view of how looking after a college garden is different from looking after university parks, and how are the two different from the point of view of the gardener?
Well, college gardens are more private spaces than somewhere like university parks. The university parks is open to the public 364 days a year, and is a multi-use. It has sporting facilities, and people use it as a through route to get from A to B, and so not everybody's coming in to look at plants, not everybody's coming in to use it as a social space. so it gets a different sort of use. Of course, a lot of people come to walk the dog in the mornings and that kind of thing, which obviously doesn't happen in college gardens in quite the same way. So you can't garden it in the same way because it receives all kinds of wear and tear that the private garden doesn't really. So, and the nice thing about, although, you know, many college gardens are open to the public, they have long spells of the 24-hour period where they're only there for college members. And that's, you know, I think pretty important, really.
I love that idea. I love that idea.
The college, sorry. Yeah, the college members, you know, it's their private space. And they can use it in many different ways. And the thing is, I think that many people draw all kinds of things from gardens. It's not just about plants, it's not just about colour, but, you know, it's about appreciation of space and looking at the wildlife that comes in and all those kinds of things.
When I think of my own days in college, I can walk around the whole garden in my head, and I can think of the different spaces where I've enjoyed time with friends, or I've sat privately to read in a quiet space, or I've simply enjoyed the different plants, or I've been in some big social event and come out of the music building onto the lawn and looked up at the trees and strolled around with people, and also the more riotous sort of things that one does. So I just love the way this is happening. Let's go to the Suffragette Border then, shall we?
Okay, yeah, that'd be great.
Yes, how do we do that? Oh yes, here we are. Well, over to you, Walter. Please tell us what you're doing here.
Oh, yeah. Well, many people watching will remember this as a very narrow border with a strip of grass in front of it. And we've made the border deeper and changed the level a bit to try and make it more interesting. And the brief from the Gardens Committee was to use suffragette colours, so purples and whites. And I work quite hard at trying to get a flow of colour. So we start off with some early flowering bulbs, for instance, things like anemone blanda, which would be out in February, early March. Because one of the things, if you think about the academic year, you know, people come up at the start of term. There's this long winter period, which is almost a term and a half, before gardens spring into life again. So I think it's really quite important to be able to try and have a flow of colour.
I quite agree. So tell me, Walter, what are you doing just at the moment to prepare all this for freshers?
Well, we've been working hard on getting the borders tidied up and looking as good as possible. Because of the COVID situation, we'd had no garden staff for about 6 weeks. And then there've been kind of 1.5 of us, of the 3, for quite a long period until August. So, you know, we've been running to keep up with all of this stuff. So we've more lately, when we've had a full team back, we've been working through the borders, trying to make it, you know, make them look as good as possible.
I think it looks absolutely wonderful, and I don't think you can see, from these close-ups, you can't see the total effect, but I just exclaimed when I came around the corner and I saw all the way along the bottom of the whole building this great foam of white Japanese anemones, not just 1 or 2, but all the way along. It's the most beautiful thing. I think if I had just come up for the first time to Oxford, it would be a mental snapshot forever.
Yeah.
And it's just because then you have the lawn that way you're...
Yeah, that's one of the one of the things I hoped we would achieve, Sarah, was to, to have this hit of colour now when people are coming up, and particularly for people coming up for the first time. Hopefully we'll get some warm afternoons and people will be able to enjoy the garden at the start of term.
Lovely. So let's stroll along, shall we, and look at the Japanese garden at the end of the whole garden, because there's some fantastically interesting planting there. This is, I think, one of the most private corners of the college. It's lovely. See the seat by the river. What you have to imagine is on your left is the river frontage. And I think St Hilda's is unique among all Oxford colleges in having a river frontage, which has always really been a way to walk by the river. And at last, Walter's made the most of this. It's such a wonderful feature of college. Could you say a little bit, maybe later after we've talked about the Japanese garden, about how you've organized the frontage, because this has always been a problem. But let's have a look at the Japanese garden first.
Yeah, well, this is quite a deep border, and of course it has a lovely brick wall at the back of it, and it's actually a nice secluded place to sit, Sarah. So
yes,
we've tried to capture some of that seclusion by using one or two larger shrubs. So one of the things that everyone's seeing as pictures at the moment is Aurelia elatia, which is a very quick growing tall plant, but it's not an invasive plant. And people are saying a picture of Clerodendron trichotomum at the moment. And again, there's a whole mix of things. Again, we've used bulbs as an underplanting. And then there's early spring colour with things like Dicentra spectabilis. And of course, there are one or two memorial trees planted in this border too. So we've tried to enhance those with the planting that we've put in. And so there's a whole series of colour. And at the moment, for instance, there's Caryopteris, which is blue flowered, and Ceratostigma, and the Clerodendron. But earlier in the year, we've used Daphne, for instance, because it's beautifully scented, and they're near the seat. So there's hopefully all kinds of seasonal interest going on all the time. And when you look across the lawn, past the cedar tree, there's a nice bank of leaf forms and textures and flower colours.
This has been achieved in such a very short time already. In 2 years, you've produced this fantastic Aurelia, which is, what, 15 feet high already?
Yes. Yeah.
It makes the most beautiful architectural shape. Here it is, we're looking at it now.
Yeah.
And it's at the same time, yes.
It grows very quickly, Sarah, but it's not a problematic plant, and it's as tall as it will get there. And what we'll do is we'll thin out those thicker, taller stems year on year, and it will produce new stems. So there's a pruning cycle to undertake to be able to get the best from it. But it's a very handsome thing. Has very spiny stems, extremely spiny stems.
Really?
Yes. But
thank you for warning us.
But it's a lovely thing, and it seems to like it there. It's done exceptionally well.
I love the way you see gardening as a process. I remember that when I was on the garden committee, people used to say, oh, we want the garden to look like such and such, and they were thinking of a static picture. But I think one of the beauties of a garden is when you are looking forward and you're saying what you're going to do and what it's going to look like. And it's a sort of slow motion modeling. Yes.
Well, gardens are a dynamic thing. So, you can get they can look wonderful for a short period. in any particular growing season. The great game to play is trying to have periods in the year when it's looking really good, not just one particular time, but to have a succession so that it's dynamic and, you know, people are enjoying that space at different periods of time, not thinking, oh dear, I should have been here a month ago because it probably looked good then.
Yes.
Gardening's an interesting art form in that way. Because
we're so lucky to have you as the artist.
Well, you're very kind. But
I want people now to see your pièce de résistance, which is the Riverside Walk. So shall we now start to walk alongside the river? And I'd love you to tell us a bit about the special problems and possibilities that a riverside like this gives us.
Yeah, well, St Hilda's is extremely fortunate in its site, in that most of your buildings overlook the river, and you're close to the river. And there are one or two other colleges that are close to the river, but not in the same way. I mean, I was at Wolfson for 10 years. And it's actually harder to get near to the water at Wolfson. Although you have lovely views of the river, it's harder to be near it. And if you think about Magdalen, for instance, again, it's true there. You know, you by the river, but not so near it. Christchurch Meadow, of course, is a different experience because you're in a more agricultural environment than a garden environment.
I like the way what you've mediated here between garden and agricultural, because you've got this almost wild planting just at the moment.
Yes.
Like these sort of rather prairie-ish plants.
Yes.
For me, the Merton beds in the Botanic Garden.
Yeah, they're just hardy annuals, really, Sarah. And Philippa Hulley, who's the garden fellow, when we started lockdown, she said, why don't we sow all of this down with a wildflower mix? And it's worked brilliantly well. And the border had already been cleared because we've taken the rather ugly chestnut paling fence, protective fence that was along the back wall, the river wall, away, and we've replaced it with a much lighter weight, actually more secure fence, and created a service pathway along the back so that the river wall can be properly maintained. And the border had been stripped of all its herbaceous perennials, and so it was an excellent idea. And because of lockdown, Philippa actually sowed the things, and Neil Hyatt, who's the buildings manager, saw that it was watered occasionally, and it's done its own thing, and it has been fantastic.
I think it's lovely the way you're allowing engaging college members with the hands-on aspect of gardening. And I'd just like to have you say a few words about this quince tree, which is for many people a very significant object, and we all rather hope that the gardener will allow us to have a few quinces to make quince jelly. You tell us about it, because you told me, I think, that it was a particularly nice tree.
It is a nice tree. It has particularly good fruit. Quince can be quite variable in the freedom of fruiting and the quality of the fruit. And this is a particularly good one, although we're not sure what variety it is. And certainly, as you say, various people come and get fruit and make jelly with it. And it's just coming up at the moment to its peak. So you can begin to smell the fruit just about, which is an indication it's ripe, and it's beginning to drop one or two. So I think now's the moment for picking, Sarah.
Oh, well, I think perhaps I'd better get there before the freshers.
Absolutely.
But I do remember one year that one of the administrators actually made a great many pots of quince jelly and sold them in aid of some college, no, the St. John Ambulance, I think it was.
Right. Yeah.
So, this is it's a bit of a treasure, this tree. So I think
Yeah.
you find yourself having to mediate between different rapacious fellows.
Well, I might try and keep a low profile on that one, Sarah.
I don't think you would. Yes, I shouldn't mention that. Talking about problems, I wonder if we could proceed a little bit along towards the rockery, because that again was always a problem. It used to be managed by dedicated resident fellows who personally weeded it for hours a day.
Yes.
You know, few as they have time to weed a border, because most college fellows aren't resident, or if they are, they have a great many other things to do. So would you like to tell us how you're handling what looks to me like a really very difficult gardening problem here?
Yes, well, it had become quite overgrown and neglected. It had an enormous number of tree seedlings that had been allowed to develop, and some bramble, and lots of ivy. So it was, we'd come to a point really where you could hardly see any rock work. And all those lovely views along that walkway and towards the river were being obscured by some of these trees that were developing. So we've removed all of those, and we've been stripping away the ivy and the bramble and revealing the rocks again. And rather interestingly, revealing some of the more robust alpine plants that were there. And some of the things have re-emerged again, Sarah.
That's fantastic, because I know that Dame Helen Gardner was devoted to this border and knew a lot about it. And she would have been absolutely delighted. Sometimes we've wondered if we can keep this rockery going at all, but clearly with your advice, we can. And I think she would have been very delighted by that.
Yeah, well, I think it's a unique feature, and it's something that marks St Hilda's out from any other college. There are not many colleges that have got rock gardens, and this linear form that it has means that if we can restore it and cultivate these plants to a reasonable standard, you're very close to them on this linear walk. Often if you, with rock gardens, you're too far away from them without having to clamber over, lots of rock to get to look at the thing. And of course, in an institutional garden, that's not ideal for all kinds of reasons, not least health and safety, but also protection of the plants. So if you think about somewhere like the Botanic Garden, which has a large rock garden, as you know, and many people will know, you're often a long way away from the plants.
Yes.
And of course, if you look at St John's College, for instance, they have the Bidder Rock Garden, but the rock is very dominant. And again, you're quite a long way away. And I created a rock cascade at Wolfson, but again, it's not very easy to see any plant material.
I think what you've done here is produce something which has a real academic function. In the University of Heidelberg, they actually have, you may have been there, a lovely thing that feels a bit like a track away into the fields, but has lovely fruit trees over it and round about. And they call it the Poet's Way, I think. But it's part of academic life to stroll gently up and down thinking. And
yes.
This, I don't think any other Oxford college has this feeling of almost being on the edge of the university in the countryside, and you stroll along, and it's very, very composing and constructive place to be.
Yeah.
It's lovely.
Yeah. And of course, with the new building, there will be a good link to all that new landscape around the new building, and then
Yes.
that will lead you on past the pavilion, which you can see in the picture. There's clad in scaffolding at the moment.
Oh, yes.
And it'll take you along that whole riverside walk, so that there will be a flow to all of this once phase one is completed.
I wish Mary Moore could have seen this, a recent, not so long ago, principal, because it was her absolute dream to make something of the walkway along the river, and now this is going to be achieved. I think these photographs perhaps haven't shown exactly how delightful it is to have a college that looks straight out over these beautiful gardens. Then there's the river, then there's the Magdalen College playing fields, and there are the dreaming spires.
Yes.
But in nothing else between you and real historic Oxford. It's a gorgeous scene.
Yeah, it is.
And
yeah, absolutely.
do you think it's time that we moved on to the wilder part of college and the
Yeah.
So let's go to the principal's orchard and the meadow.
Yeah. Well, we've had a significant cleanup operation here. Part of this area was used for compost and plant material and was a bit of a rubbish dump. So we cleaned all of that up and reseeded it and pruned some of the trees and improved the area generally. And it'll be a much better, pleasanter space, hopefully for students to shake out into, and there'll be room to sit in a pleasant space, not surrounded by compost bins and garden waste and all of that stuff. And of course it leads into the meadow, and in due course we're hoping to take away the old chain link fence and put in more of an estate style metal fence, with some gateways through so that people can actually walk in the meadow a bit. And we've mown out through the meadow a temporary pathway to encourage people to walk along the tree line. And obviously we don't want to flatten out the middle of the meadow and wreck the flora there, but it has been a bit of a forgotten corner of the college, really. Yes. And gradually, as buildings are developed and green space shrinks, this is going to become a more important space, probably.
Yes.
So it's pleasant, and there are some nice trees planted to commemorate various principles. So there's quite a nice mix of woody plants there, really.
Can you tell us about the pair of black poplars?
Yes. Well, black poplars, true black poplars, native to Britain, and they're often, when you buy black poplars, they're not truly the species, because poplars hybridize very readily. But these two black poplars we think are true to type. Of course, they're native to this part of the British Isles, and they grow surprisingly quickly. I mean, I think you think these are about 20 years old, Sarah? Maybe
2025.
Yeah. So they would have just been planted as small trees, but they've grown up tremendously well, and they make already quite an impact. And they produce lovely autumn colour, of course. So in the coming weeks, the leaves will turn a lovely lemon yellow.
And I think we're doing our bit for conservation of wild Oxfordshire here, aren't we? Because they are.
Yes, oh, absolutely, very much so. Yeah. and there are not many black poplars around in Oxford. There's one at Wolfson, but there are not too many about, really. There are lots of hybrids. The trees that are further down the tree line on the edge of the meadow are very definitely hybrid poplars, Sarah.
Ah, right. What we were rather pleased about was that we there are trees that come in as males and females, aren't they? Some trees do actually have genders in that way, and so it was rather nice that college decided to buy a male black poplar and a female black poplar and put them side by side. It's a sort of rather mythical thing to do, isn't it? And so we hope that they're going to produce more.
Yeah. Well, in due course, perhaps there'll be sending seed down the river and populating the banks of the Thames further downstream.
Because they are watery plants, aren't they?
Oh, they are, very much so, yes. And one of their dispersal methods is casting their seed upon the waters, and it germinates along the riverbanks. It's the same with willows too.
Ah. Do you think, when I first came to St Hilda's very, very long time ago, there was a little footbridge that went across from our meadow into Christchurch Meadows.
Yeah.
With your knowledge of the university parks arrangements and gardens, do you think there would be ever any chance of something like that being reinstated? Because it would be so nice.
Well, everything's possible. We probably have to sweetheart Christchurch. I don't know how easy that is to do, really. But yeah, it would be lovely.
Tell me a bit about your management of this wild meadow, because it has got some quite unusual plants in it, hasn't it?
Yes, it has. Well, it has a very good stand of snake's head fritillaries, and also meadowsweet too. So what needs to happen is that we need to take a crop of hay really from it after all of these plants have seeded, so in early August, late July, early August. And the aftermath that's cut really needs to be removed. And this is so that the soil doesn't get enriched too much by the organic matter. Because all of these things prefer less nutrient and a less rich soil. And if the soil becomes enriched, the grasses are too vigorous and they tend to shade out all of those things that we really want. And so, you know, people often can't get the hang of this need to remove the aftermath, the cut material. And it is very important that it is cut. There's also this view, well, you know, perhaps we should leave the grass. But again, it shades during the autumn and winter period. If it's left, it shades out a lot of those plants that we really want to encourage.
I like the way you've made a path around the edge, so that's another very nice strolling place, isn't it?
Yes. Well, we want to encourage people to A, be aware of the area, and B, to use it in a sensible way. And we hope that the pathway will help achieve that. And it's an easy, cheap device. You know, we were just running a ride-on mower along the path every couple of weeks to keep the grass short there. And we've followed the tree line and tried to develop a nice kind of gentle curve so that there's little risk of the flora that we really want to encourage being destroyed.
It's tremendously inviting. When we come to the riverbank itself, had you got any plans to work on that? Because at the moment it's very densely planted with trees, isn't it? Not all of them native.
Yeah, well, we're just about to pollard willow, a crack willow, Salix fragilis, which is tucked away along that tree line. And the work is required on the other trees. We recently lost an alder along there, which we've removed. There are a couple of other alders left. Alders suffer from a waterborne fungus called Phytophthora. So lots of alders that were on the riverbank in the Charwell Basin have died as a result of this. Most of the ones in the university parks have died in the last 20 years.
Oh dear.
So, but, you know, that's just a natural progression, and there's not much we can do about it. But there's some regeneration of other trees along there too. So it's a question of striking the balance, really.
Yes. Is there a car parking problem? Will people be wanting to, or is this a thing of the past? I can remember questions about parking cars in this space, and maybe that's not happening now.
It doesn't happen much. It's not a problem as an occasional thing, Sarah. I mean,
Right.
you know, in the latter bit of the summer, after the grass has been cut short, but it's not something that you could do regularly or long. Yeah.
Well, what I'd like to do now is go and have a look at what you've done around Wolfson Building, because that, again, is really interesting, I think. Can we go there?
Yeah. I think with the Wolfson border, Sarah, because there's this long, unattractive strip of what's technically called grasscrete, which is a plastic material which will take the weight of vehicles. And the college has to have that strip to service fire tenders accessing various buildings. Yes. So that was very unattractive. And what we've done is to try to compartmentalize the area so that there's very definite walkway along the front of the Wolfson building, and then separating this other grass strip out in front of the Dupre building and Wolfson. And it's worked, I think, pretty well. The planting's extremely lush, and it's rather interesting that this year planting that's immediately next to the building is spilling out very nicely over the pathway and under the windows, and it makes you realize how many undergraduates use their windows as doors ordinarily, trample the planting somewhat. So it's done better this year than it has the previous 2 years. And on the strip on the other side between the grasscrete and the pathway, during the winter months, we've got some topiarized yew, which we're clipping. So there's strong architectural form. So the grasses, miscanthus, will go brown, and there are these nice dark green, almost bollard-like conifers that run along the pathway and draw your eye along as a winter feature. And then in the summer, of course, we've softened all of that up with using things like Perovskia and sedums and agapanthus and various things. So again, there's a succession of colour, and hopefully the people walking along the pathway there their eyes taken away from the grass creep, which is the whole point of doing
It's all pulled together as a beautiful space that you can imagine walking around. I like it very much.
Yeah.
The other beautiful space I'd love you to tell us a bit about is how you've retrieved the Principal's Rose, the Fellows Rose Garden,
Oh, yes.
because that has been transformed and we were in despair. Everything seemed to die, but now it seems fine again. So
Yeah.
tell us how you did it.
Well, the first thing was we've kept the vermin out, just with a little bit of chicken wire, really, put through the hedge, put through the beech hedge. That used to frequently get breached by muntjac, and they would come and graze the roses. Deer love roses. It seems slightly odd that such a prickly plant could be so attractive to deer, but they are. And the biggest other problem was the beech hedge had become very wide, so it was about between 6 and 8 feet wide in places, and we've now reduced that to about 3 feet wide. So that there's, and we've reduced the top of it, but also retained height at the back behind that beautiful curved seat and the 2 rose arches. So there's a little bit of variation in height. And then we root pruned the hedge and cut off a lot of the root that was invading from the big beech tree by the access gate to the garden.
Oh yes, we're seeing it now.
So we dug a deep trench and dug down about 2.5 feet, so all through the topsoil level, and chopped through all of that root, which was invading the bed space where the roses are and competing very heavily for nutrients and water. And the other thing that we've done is underplant with things like Gora and Verbena rigida and Helichrysum, things like that, which covers the ground. And by covering the ground, although those things take up water and nutrients, they actually help maintain the moisture levels in the garden too. So lo and behold, all those roses that looked so sickly, suddenly they've become very happy. It was quite a lot of work to do, and we've been hand pruning the hedge in the last 2 growing seasons to thicken it again, because obviously beech, when you've pruned it so heavily, it takes a while to come back thickly. So you have to kind of encourage it here and there where it's in a bit of a hole. And I think it's very interesting to see some of these historic pictures that are coming up too, which of the garden in the past, Sarah.
Yes, it's amazing how of course, a lot of what we do in the garden has changed quite a bit. One never had to deal with conferences. Looking at those flannelled characters playing croquet reminds me that, of course, now, all through the long vacation, we have groups of all sorts of people and to cater for.
Yes.
Well, that's great. So I think we now have some questions coming up.
Right. Okay.
So, Triona. Questions? Here we are. Oh, here we are. I beg your pardon. So here we have a question from Rebecca Walker and several other people. Are there any plans for extending the garden to inside or on the roof of the new building with planters and the like?
Yes, the upper terrace, we've already prepared plans for planting up those raised beds, which were designed in by the architect. So there are two areas, because there are kind of two terraces linked by a pathway along the top line. And I've designed a scheme that I hope will be good. It remains to be seen how successful I am in my choice of plants with that, because the thing about roof terraces is they're rather exposed, and you've got high sunlight, but you've also got a lot more air movement. And so there's a great balance to be struck with all of these things. But I have got some experience of that with the planting at the Ashmolean next to on their roof terrace next to their restaurant.
Yes.
And also St Anne's developed a roof terrace a few years ago. But it's you need to choose your plants very carefully. But yes, there's a planting scheme up there, and I hope it will look attractive. And it's largely an all year round scheme, in that I've tried to use architectural plants that'll stand right through the winter as well as have colour in the summer.
That's great. What a good question. Thank you, Rebecca Walker. We have another one from Jed Fisher, who says, I wonder whether there has been a difference in the use and appearance of the gardens in the years since St Hilda's went co-educational. Oh, that's for me, because can you remember a change? When did St Hilda's go co-educational?
Yeah, well, I think that the use of all college gardens has changed quite a lot, Sarah. And as you mentioned before, there are the garden spaces are more used because of conferences and things that happen during the vacations, both Easter and the long vac. And so I would guess probably since they became co-educational, there probably is a change of use, but it's a bit beyond my knowledge personally.
What I do know is that when the college was single-sex, there was always a fear that the bar, which was well staffed and stocked, was not attracting many people. But I believe that that's now changed. And I noticed that in Hall Garden, there's a sort of sunken garden where the JCR bar has some sitting places. And I wondered if there were any plans to plant that up at all.
We haven't addressed that yet. It gets well used, that terrace, and of course people can spill out onto the lawn on a summer's evening, and because the benches are movable, people drag the benches around and make.
Oh, so they do, and there are piles of cigarette ends and no bottles and cans and things.
Well, yeah, but that's only a byproduct of having fun, isn't it?
Exactly, yes. What a very humane observation. Are there any byproducts of having fun, for example, that you need?
Yeah, well, certainly, because I think people work out more in the garden now because of Wi-Fi and all of that kind of thing. People take their electronic devices outside and work away in quiet spaces, and in a way perhaps that's different from in the past before all of the technology came along.
Nice thought. I think now we have a question to end with. Oh, this is a nice one. This is a nice question. How would you like undergraduates and fellows and alumni to remember and think of their time in your gardens?
Well, I hope they'd find a place of happiness and a place where they could reflect and work and share time with their friends and colleagues. And I mean, gardens are ephemeral things and they change all the time, and we need to be light of foot to adapt all gardens so that they're the most usable they can be for the people at that moment. So I would hope that everybody who enjoys a garden, particularly at St Hilda's, will have happy memories of that in the, you know, that they take away with them in the future.
I'm absolutely sure that you're right, and I really feel that this is so much in the spirit of St Hilda's. It's a college I've always had a great admiration for and pleasure in. I came from, when I was young, unimaginably long ago, I came from Girton as a junior research fellow. And I was approached the domestic bursar very nervously, thinking I must have done all sorts of things wrong and so on. And she said, "My dear Miss Day, all we want to do is to make you happy." And sure enough, that turned out to be the ethos of St Hilda's. Surprise. Mm. I you know, you have really contributed to making St Hilda's the unique place it is. And thank you, Walter.
It's a pleasure. It's nice to be able to make some gentle changes and some gentle improvements, you know, for the pleasure of everyone else. I
think that they will be life enhancing for every single member of the college. And I thank you very, very much indeed. I'm delighted with this whole achievement. Thank you. So Triona is going to come back and...
Hello, here I am. We've all been here enjoying the session very much, and really enjoying everyone's reminiscences in the live chat about time spent in the meadow and playing croquet and doing plays and swimming in the river. So Walter, thank you for your expert guide, and Sarah, thank you for being our conduit between audience and garden. There is a film which is on the website page that I've put in the chat as well, where you can see a bit more of the work that's going on at the moment and the improvements and renovations, I think, taking some of the gardens back to their original glory. So thank you both very much. You put in an awful lot of time and effort into joining us for this Gaudy, and I certainly learned an awful lot. I hope we'll be seeing lots of you. We'll be seeing Walter and Sarah again in a little bit for Gardener's Question Time, when I hope all your answers about growing tomatoes in bags to massive beech hedges, from patios to estates, all of those lockdown questions will be answered. But for now, we're just going to say goodbye. Thank you for joining us for this first Gaudy session, and we'll see you all later.
Cheerio, everyone.
Sure.